On a cold, rainy night, Big Shaq stumbled upon a starving boy clutching an empty paper bag. What began as a simple act of kindness turned into a heartwarming journey that changed the boy's life forever. But the biggest surprise: the incredible talent Shaq would uncover along the way. This is a story of hope, compassion, and the ripple effect of one selfless moment. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, tell us, where are you watching from? Share in the comments below. The city streets glistened under the dull glow of flickering streetlights, their beams fractured by the steady drizzle that soaked everything in sight. Puddles formed along the cracked pavement as the rain continued to fall, relentless and cold. The evening was quiet, save for the distant honks of cars and the shuffle of hurried footsteps from those eager to escape the chill. Big Shaq adjusted the hood of his jacket, pulling it tighter against the rain as he exited the community center. His wide shoulders were wrapped in a thick, gray hoodie that bore the logo of the event he had just attended, a charity drive he'd spearheaded to provide food and supplies to local families in need. His larger-than-life presence was softened by the warm smile he had exchanged with every volunteer inside, his booming laugh still echoing in the minds of those who had spoken with him. As he made his way toward his car parked a block away, Shaq's eyes swept over the street. He noticed the usual late-night bustle, people huddling under umbrellas, street vendors hurriedly packing up their carts. But then his gaze stopped abruptly. A boy, no older than 10, sat alone on the curb, his small frame hunched against the cold. The child was soaked to the bone, his thin hoodie clinging to his back and his sneakers squelching in a puddle. He clutched a crumpled paper bag in one hand, the edges soggy and empty, while his other hand wrapped tightly around his knees. Shaq could see his hollow cheeks and the gauntness in his eyes, which stared blankly ahead as though he didn't have the strength to move. Shaq paused mid-step, his breath forming a small cloud in the cold air. Something about the boy tugged at him, an ache settling deep in his chest. He glanced up and down the street, hoping to spot a parent or guardian, but there was no one. Just the boy, alone and drenched. "Hey, kid," Shaq called out gently, his deep voice carrying over the sound of the rain. The boy flinched slightly, startled by the voice, but didn't look up. Shaq approached cautiously, his steps deliberate to avoid scaring the child. He crouched a few feet away, lowering his towering frame to the boy's level. "What are you doing out here all by yourself?" Shaq asked, his tone kind but filled with concern. The boy hesitated, his lips trembling from the cold. He tightened his grip on the paper bag as if it held something precious, though Shaq could see it was completely empty. I'm waiting," the boy muttered finally, his voice hoarse. "Waiting for what?" Shaq pressed, leaning in slightly. "For the rain to stop," the boy said, barely above a whisper. Shaq's heart sank. He could tell from the boy's appearance, his too thin frame, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped into feet, that this wasn't just a child caught in a passing rainstorm. This was a child in trouble. "You eaten anything today?" Shaq asked softly, though he already knew the answer. The boy shook his head, his damp hair clinging to his forehead. "Not since yesterday," he admitted, his voice cracking. Shaq exhaled, a mix of frustration and sadness swirling within him. The boy's answer was a harsh reminder of the struggles so many faced in the very neighborhoods Shaq had been trying to help. "All right, buddy," Shaq said, his tone firm but kind. "We can't have you sitting out here like this. Let's get you something warm to eat, yeah?" The boy looked up at Shaq for the first time, his brown eyes wide and cautious. "Why?" he asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. Shaq offered a reassuring smile. "Because no one deserves to be out here like this. Come on, kid. I'm not going to hurt you. Let's get you warmed up." The boy hesitated, glancing down at the paper bag in his hand as if weighing his options. Slowly, he stood, his legs shaky from exhaustion. Shaq noticed how the boy's sneakers had holes in them, the wet fabric barely holding together. "What's your name?" Shaq asked, as he gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, leading him toward his car. "Tyler," the boy replied quietly. "Well, Tyler," Shaq said, unlocking the car and opening the passenger door, "you've just made a new friend, and friends don't let friends go hungry." Tyler climbed into the warm car hesitantly, his small frame disappearing into the plush seat. As Shaq slid into the driver's side, he glanced over and gave Tyler a comforting nod. "Let's get you something to eat, and then we'll figure out how else I can help," Shaq said, his voice filled with quiet determination. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the car, there was a growing warmth, a spark of hope for a boy who had nearly lost it, and for a man determined to make a difference. Inside the warmth of Shaq's car, Tyler sat quietly, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Drops of rain streaked the windows, creating a blurred view of the city outside. Shaq glanced over at the boy, his heart heavy at the sight of his damp clothes and trembling frame. He reached into the center console and pulled out a small towel, handing it to Tyler. "Here," Shaq said gently. "Dry off a little. Can't have you catching a cold now, can we?" Tyler took the towel hesitantly, his fingers brushing the soft fabric like it was something unfamiliar. He wiped his face and arms, his movements slow and tentative. Shaq watched him, searching for the right words to break the silence. "You hungry, kid?" Shaq asked finally. Tyler nodded, but his gaze stayed fixed on his lap. "Yeah," he whispered. "But it's not just me. My mom. She hasn't eaten either." Shaq leaned back in his seat, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on, Tyler? You out here by yourself in the rain? Your mom hasn't eaten. Talk to me. Let me help." Tyler hesitated, his small hands tightening into fists. For a moment it seemed like he wouldn't answer, but then the words spilled out, shaky and full of pain. "My dad left us last year," Tyler said, his voice barely audible. "We've been trying to get by, but my mom got sick a few months ago. She can't work anymore and we don't have enough for food or rent. I was trying to find something to bring back to her." Shaq's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression calm, not wanting to scare the boy. "How long has it been since you ate?" he asked, though he already knew the answer wouldn't sit well. 2 days, Tyler admitted, his voice cracking. Shaq exhaled slowly, the weight of Tyler's story settling heavily in his chest. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet, counting out a few bills. "All right, here's what we're gonna do. There's a diner a few blocks from here. We're gonna get you a hot meal, and I'm sending you home with enough to last a week." Tyler's head shot up, his eyes wide. "You'd do that?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Shaq smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his expression. "Of course I would. Nobody deserves to go hungry, Tyler, especially not you." But Tyler hesitated, his fingers clutching the edge of the towel. "I can't leave my mom alone for too long," he said. "She's really sick. I don't want her to wake up and think I'm gone." Shaq's expression softened. He shifted in his seat, turning to face Tyler more directly. "Listen, kid, I'm not just gonna feed you and send you on your way. I'm gonna help your mom, too. We'll grab some food, then we'll go check on her together, all right?" Tyler's lip quivered, and for a moment Shaq thought he might start crying. Instead, the boy nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. Shaq reached over and tousled Tyler's wet hair, his touch light and reassuring. "That's more like it. Now let's get you something warm to eat, huh?" As Shaq started the car and pulled onto the wet street, he glanced at Tyler again. The boy's shoulders seemed a little less slumped, and there was a flicker of hope in his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The rain continued to fall as they drove, but inside the car, the atmosphere was beginning to shift. Tyler wasn't just a starving boy on the street anymore. He was a kid with a story, a name, and a chance for something better. And Shaq, with his unwavering determination, was ready to make sure he got it. This moment wasn't just about a meal. It was about restoring dignity and offering a lifeline to someone who desperately needed it. As the diner's neon sign came into view, Shaq knew this was only the beginning. The rain had eased to a drizzle by the time Shaq parked his car outside a crumbling brick apartment building. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, with only the faint flicker of a streetlight breaking the gloom. Shaq's chest tightened as he followed Tyler, who clutched a small bag of food from the diner in his hands, toward the building's entrance. The boy walked quickly, his small figure dwarfed by the towering man behind him. "Is this where you live?" Shaq asked gently, his voice low to mask his concern. Tyler nodded, pushing open a door that creaked on its hinges. "Yeah, it's not much, but it's home." Shaq stepped inside and was immediately met with the smell of dampness and mildew. The dimly lit hallway was lined with peeling wallpaper, and the faint hum of a broken radiator echoed through the space. His heart sank further with every step, but he kept his expression neutral, not wanting to make Tyler feel embarrassed. They climbed 2 flights of rickety stairs before reaching a door with chipped paint and a missing number. Tyler fumbled for his key, the sound of it scraping against the lock breaking the silence. He pushed the door open and turned to Shaq. "This is it." Inside, the apartment was dark and sparsely furnished. A small table sat in the corner, one leg propped up with a stack of old magazines. A couch, worn and threadbare, served as the centerpiece of the living room. The air was chilly, and Shaq noticed a blanket draped over the only window, blocking out what little light might have come through. "Mom?" Tyler called out, his voice echoing through the apartment. From a back room, a weak voice responded. "Tyler? Is that you?" Tyler set the bag of food on the table and hurried toward the voice. Shaq followed, ducking slightly to avoid the low-hanging door frame. In the bedroom, a woman lay on a thin mattress with no frame. Her face was pale, and her hair, once vibrant, had lost its luster. Grace, as Tyler introduced her, tried to sit up when she saw Shaq, but the effort clearly pained her. "Hi," she said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Grace. Thank you for helping my son." Shaq crouched down beside the bed, his massive frame making the small room feel even tinier. "It's no problem," he said warmly. "I'm Shaq. Tyler told me you weren't feeling well." As Grace spoke, Shaq took in the room. The walls were bare except for a single photo of Tyler as a toddler, taped up near the bed. A small nightstand held a glass of water and a bottle of pills. Beside it, a plastic bin overflowed with unopened bills and medical paperwork. Grace noticed him looking and sighed. "I'm sorry for the mess," she said, attempting to push herself up. Shaq gently placed a hand on her shoulder, stopping her. "Don't worry about that," he said, his voice kind but firm. "Right now, the only thing that matters is getting you better." Grace gave him a small, tired smile. "That's easier said than done," she replied. "We've been trying to keep things together, but it's been hard since I got sick. I lost my job and, well, things just kept piling up." Tyler stood quietly in the doorway, watching his mother with concern. Shaq glanced back at the boy and motioned for him to come closer. "Your son's a strong kid," Shaq said, looking back at Grace. "He told me how he's been looking out for you." Tears welled in Grace's eyes as she reached for Tyler's hand. "He's been my rock," she said. "But he shouldn't have to be." Shaq felt a lump rise in his throat. The weight this family was carrying was almost too much to bear, and yet here they were, holding on to each other despite it all. Standing up, Shaq took a deep breath, his mind already racing with ideas. He couldn't leave this family in this condition, not when he had the resources and connections to make a difference. "Grace," he said, turning back to her, "I want to help. Not just tonight, but for the long run. You're going to need more than just a warm meal to get back on your feet." Grace looked at him, her expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Why would you do that for us?" she asked softly. Shaq smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, and because I've been blessed enough to be in a position to help. So let me do this." Tyler looked up at Shaq with wide eyes. "You mean it?" he asked. Shaq knelt beside the boy, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I mean it, kid," he said. "We're gonna get your mom back on her feet, and we're gonna make sure you never have to go hungry again." The room fell silent for a moment as Grace and Tyler processed his words. For the first time in a long while, hope flickered in their eyes. As Shaq left the apartment that night, he promised himself that this was just the beginning. The road ahead might be long, but he was determined to make a difference, for Grace, for Tyler, and for every family like theirs. As Shaq stepped out of the dimly lit apartment building, the cold night air hit him like a reminder of the harsh reality Grace and Tyler faced every day. The quiet streets, dotted with flickering streetlights and the faint sound of distant traffic, mirrored the heavy ache in his chest. He paused on the cracked pavement, glancing back at the building one last time. "Not on my watch," he murmured to himself, his jaw tightening with determination. Sliding into the driver's seat of his car, Shaq pulled out his phone. His mind raced with ideas, each one building on the other like puzzle pieces falling into place. He couldn't just walk away, not when there was so much he could do. Shaq's first call was to a friend who managed a local food distribution center. "Hey man," he began, his voice steady but urgent. "I've got a family in serious need. Can you set up regular food deliveries for them? I'll cover the cost." The response on the other end was immediate and reassuring. "Absolutely, Shaq. Just send me the details." Next, he contacted a landlord he knew who often worked with families in tough situations. Shaq explained Grace's predicament and secured a commitment to help with rent, ensuring the family wouldn't have to worry about eviction while they got back on their feet. With every call, Shaq felt the weight on his heart lighten just a little. He wasn't just reacting. He was building a safety net for Grace and Tyler, piece by piece. But food and rent weren't enough. Grace needed proper medical care, and Shaq wasn't going to settle for anything less. He dialed the number of a trusted physician he'd worked with during past community outreach events. "Dr. Ellis," Shaq began, his tone firm but respectful. "I've got a family in a tough spot. The mom is sick and she hasn't had the chance to see a doctor in months. Can you make a house call? I'll cover everything. Just tell me what you need." Dr. Ellis didn't hesitate. "Of course, Shaq. Send me the address and I'll head over tomorrow. We'll get her the care she needs." Shaq leaned back in his seat, a small smile breaking through his otherwise serious demeanor. Knowing that help was on the way for Grace was a relief, but he wasn't done yet. Shaq's final call of the night was to a community center director he frequently collaborated with. "Listen, I've got a boy who's been through more than any kid his age should have to handle," Shaq explained. "He's smart, kind, and he needs a chance to just be a kid. Can we set something up for him? Maybe after-school programs or some mentoring?" The director agreed enthusiastically, promising to personally oversee Tyler's enrollment in programs that would help him academically and emotionally. With a satisfied nod, Shaq ended the call. It wasn't just about giving them immediate relief, it was about creating a foundation for lasting change. As he sat in his car, Shaq stared out at the rain-slicked streets, his thoughts a mixture of resolve and hope. He thought about Tyler's wide, cautious eyes and Grace's frail smile. They were more than just a struggling family. They were people with dreams, potential, and dignity that had been overshadowed by circumstances beyond their control. "Not anymore," Shaq said aloud, gripping the steering wheel. "We're gonna fix this." Before starting the engine, he made one last note in his phone, a reminder to check in with the family regularly. For Shaq, this wasn't a one-time act of kindness. This was a commitment, a promise to see them through until they could stand on their own again. As the car pulled away from the curb, Shaq felt a renewed sense of purpose. He didn't just leave the apartment building that night. He left with a mission, a plan to turn hope into action. And for Grace and Tyler, the wheels of change had already begun to turn. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the cracks in the blanket covering the apartment window, the sound of a knock echoed through the small space. Tyler peeked out cautiously, his eyes widening as he opened the door. Standing there were two delivery workers carrying boxes of groceries, along with a third man holding cleaning supplies. Behind them stood Shaq, his broad smile lighting up the dreary hallway. "Morning, kid," Shaq greeted, ruffling Tyler's hair. "Thought we'd get started on turning this place into a home you can be proud of." Tyler stepped aside, his awe turning to excitement as the men carried in bags of fresh produce, bread, and canned goods. For the first time in months, the fridge hummed to life as it filled with food. Shaq even brought a box of snacks specifically for Tyler: cookies, chips, and his favorite cereal. The apartment quickly buzzed with activity. Shaq had hired a small team of volunteers to help clean and repair the space. Together, they scrubbed the walls, fixed the broken faucet in the kitchen, and replaced the tattered blanket with proper curtains, letting sunlight pour into the room. Grace watched from her bed, her face a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Every so often she tried to stand, offering to help, but Shaq's gentle yet firm insistence kept her resting. "Your job is to get better," he said, bringing her a cup of tea. "Leave the rest to us." As the volunteers worked, Grace turned to Shaq. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. Shaq crouched beside her, his expression warm and reassuring. "You don't need to thank me. Just focus on getting strong for Tyler. That's all the thanks I need." Later that day, Shaq returned with a surprise for Tyler, a bag filled with toys and art supplies. Tyler's eyes lit up as he pulled out a basketball, a set of colored pencils, and a sketch pad. "I heard you like to draw," Shaq said, nodding at the sketches Tyler had taped to the wall. "Let's see what you can do with these." Tyler's grin was wide and genuine, a sight that had been rare in recent months. "Thank you, Mr. Shaq," he exclaimed, hugging the large man tightly. "No problem, buddy," Shaq replied, patting the boy's back. "And call me Shaq. We're friends now, right?" Tyler nodded eagerly before running to the table to start drawing. Grace watched from the corner of the room, tears pooling in her eyes as she saw her son laughing again. The next few days brought even more changes. Dr. Ellis, the physician Shaq had contacted, arrived to examine Grace. After running some tests, he prescribed medication and a treatment plan to address her illness. "You'll need time to recover," Dr. Ellis explained. "But with the right care, you'll be back on your feet in a few months." Grace's relief was palpable. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered to Shaq after the doctor left. "For the first time in so long, I feel like there's hope." Shaq smiled, his deep voice filled with conviction. "There's always hope, Grace. Sometimes you just need someone to remind you it's there." Shaq made it a point to visit the family daily. He often brought dinner, comfort food like fried chicken, mac and cheese, and warm apple pie, and stayed to share stories that had Tyler laughing so hard, his sides hurt. One evening, as they sat around the newly repaired table, Shaq asked Tyler about his dreams. "I want to be an artist," Tyler said shyly, glancing at the sketch pad Shaq had given him. "Like the ones who make pictures for books." Shaq's face lit up. "Then that's exactly what you'll do. But first, you'll need a proper workspace. I'll see what I can do about that." Tyler's eyes widened with excitement, and Grace chuckled softly. "You're spoiling him," she said, though her smile showed she was grateful. "He deserves it," Shaq replied, his tone unwavering. "You both do." As the days turned into a week, the transformation in the family was undeniable. The apartment, once a symbol of struggle, now felt warm and inviting. Grace's health improved steadily, and she began to sit up more, her energy slowly returning. Tyler's once quiet demeanor had blossomed into playful laughter and hopeful dreams. For Shaq, seeing the change was all the reward he needed. He knew this was just the beginning of their journey, but he felt pride in knowing he had helped them find their footing. One evening, as Shaq prepared to leave, Tyler stopped him at the door. "Shaq?" "Yeah, buddy?" Tyler hesitated before throwing his arms around him. "You're the best friend I've ever had." Shaq's eyes softened, and he ruffled Tyler's hair. "Right back at you, kid. Now, keep practicing that drawing. I expect to see something amazing next time I'm here." Walking back to his car, Shaq glanced up at the apartment window, now glowing with warm light. He smiled to himself, knowing he'd made a difference. For Grace and Tyler, the darkness had lifted, replaced by a brighter, hopeful future. Shaq drove off into the night, ready to keep making the world a little better, one family at a time. It was a quiet afternoon when Shaq arrived at the apartment, carrying a box of freshly baked muffins and a basketball for Tyler. The warm scent of the treats filled the small space as Grace greeted him from the couch, her health visibly improving with each passing day. "Tyler's in his room," Grace said with a grateful smile. "He's been keeping busy lately. I think you've lit a fire in him." Curious, Shaq made his way to the bedroom door, lightly knocking before entering. Inside, he found Tyler hunched over the small table Shaq had recently gifted him. The boy didn't notice Shaq at first, completely absorbed in the task before him. On the tabletop were pieces of scrap paper, each one covered in intricate drawings, landscapes, animals, and even a sketch of Grace smiling from her bed. The lines were precise, the shading meticulous, and the details far beyond what Shaq would expect from a boy Tyler's age. "Whoa," Shaq said, his deep voice breaking the silence. "You did all this?" Tyler jumped slightly, turning to see Shaq leaning against the doorframe. Yeah," he said shyly, moving to cover the papers. "They're just doodles." Shaq stepped closer, picking up one of the sketches Tyler had tried to hide. It was a drawing of the apartment building, complete with the cracks in the walls and the flickering streetlight outside. "Kid," "This isn't just doodling," Shaq said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "This is incredible." Tyler's cheeks flushed as he glanced at the floor. "It's just something I like to do," he mumbled. "When things get hard, drawing helps me feel better." Shaq knelt beside him, holding the sketch at eye level. "You've got real talent, Tyler. Have you ever thought about doing this for more than just fun?" The boy hesitated before nodding. "I want to be an artist someday," he admitted quietly. "Like the ones who make pictures for books, but we don't have the money for stuff like that. Mom says maybe when things get better." Shaq set the sketch down and placed a reassuring hand on Tyler's shoulder. "Well, guess what?" he said with a grin. "Things are already getting better, and if you want to be an artist, we're going to make that happen." Tyler's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" Shaq said firmly. "But first, we're getting you some proper supplies. No more scraps of paper and pencils that barely work. You deserve the real deal." Shaq pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts. "I know some people who can help you out," he continued. "We'll get you into a program where you can learn from professionals. And I've got a friend who's an artist himself. I bet he'd love to meet you." Tyler's excitement was palpable. For a moment, he was speechless, his wide eyes locked on Shaq. Then he broke into a grin so big, it lit up the entire room. "Thank you, Shaq," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much." The next day, Shaq made good on his promise. He brought Tyler a bag filled with sketch pads, colored pencils, charcoals, and a set of watercolors. The boy's hands trembled as he unpacked each item, treating them like treasures. "Now these aren't just tools," Shaq said, crouching to meet Tyler's gaze. "They're the first steps toward your dream, but you've got to promise me something. You'll work hard and never give up. Deal?" Tyler nodded enthusiastically. "Deal." True to his word, Shaq reached out to a local art center that offered free classes for young talents. Within days, Tyler was enrolled in weekly lessons, where he met other kids who shared his passion. Shaq even introduced him to a professional illustrator, who agreed to mentor Tyler and help him refine his skills. Watching Tyler thrive brought an overwhelming sense of pride to Shaq. The boy, once shy and withdrawn, now walked with a newfound confidence, eager to share his work and learn more. Grace, too, noticed the change. "You've given him something I couldn't," she told Shaq one evening. "A reason to believe in himself again." Shaq shook his head. "He had it in him all along," he said. "I just gave him a little nudge." The room that had once been filled with despair was now alive with color. Tyler's sketches covered the walls, each one a testament to his growing talent and determination. As Shaq left the apartment that evening, he couldn't help but smile. Tyler's future was no longer defined by struggle, but by possibility, a testament to what could happen when someone believed in a dream. Months passed, and the once dim apartment now radiated life and warmth. The walls, which had been bare and gray, were now adorned with Tyler's colorful sketches and paintings. Each piece told a story of resilience, hope, and the transformation of a boy who once believed his dreams were out of reach. Grace, now healthier and stronger, moved with renewed energy. With the support Shaq had provided, she'd been able to recover fully and secure a part-time job at a nearby bakery. Though the hours were modest, the pride on her face whenever she spoke of her work was unmistakable. "Tyler's talent inspired me to get back on my feet," she said to Shaq one day. "If he can work so hard for his dreams, then I can too." The turning point came when Tyler's art teacher submitted his work to a local community exhibit. The theme of the exhibit was rising from adversity, and Tyler's drawings of the urban streets, his mother, and even Shaq's towering figure stood out among the submissions. When the exhibit opened, Tyler's work drew significant attention. A piece titled "Second Chances," a heartwarming depiction of Shaq handing Tyler a basketball with a background of rain and light, captivated the audience. People marveled at the boy's ability to convey emotion through his art, and many offered to purchase his pieces. The proceeds from the sales went directly to supporting Tyler's family. For the first time in years, Grace didn't have to worry about how she'd pay the bills. The night of the exhibit's grand opening was a culmination of Tyler's journey. The gallery was filled with local artists, community members, and even reporters who had heard of the young boy's inspiring story. Shaq walked into the gallery wearing a sharp black suit, his presence immediately drawing attention. But tonight wasn't about him. It was about Tyler. He found the boy standing nervously near his section of the gallery, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "Looking sharp, little man," Shaq said, grinning as he approached. Tyler looked up, his face lighting up when he saw Shaq. "You came." "Of course I came," Shaq replied, kneeling down to meet Tyler's eye level. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. You ready for your big moment?" Tyler nodded, though his excitement was tinged with nervousness. "I hope people like it," he said. Shaq placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "They'll love it. And even if they don't, you should be proud. Look how far you've come." As the evening progressed, more and more people gathered around Tyler's section of the gallery. A couple bought second chances for a significant sum, promising to hang it in their home as a reminder of the power of kindness. Reporters interviewed Tyler, who spoke shyly but earnestly about his journey and how Shaq's intervention had changed his life. "He didn't just help us," Tyler said, glancing at Shaq. "He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Shaq stood at the back of the room, watching with a mixture of pride and humility. His eyes glistened as he saw Tyler smile and interact with the crowd. No longer the shy, downtrodden boy he'd met months ago. At the end of the night, as the gallery began to clear out, Shaq and Tyler stood together outside under the glowing streetlights. Grace joined them, holding a bouquet of flowers someone had gifted Tyler. "You've come a long way, kid," Shaq said, ruffling Tyler's hair. "And this is just the beginning." Tyler beamed. "I couldn't have done it without you." Shaq shook his head, his voice soft but firm. "You had it in you all along. I just gave you a little push." As they stood there, Shaq reflected on the ripple effect of that one rainy night. Helping Tyler and Grace hadn't just changed their lives. It had reaffirmed his own belief in the power of kindness. The story didn't end with Tyler's success. The community was inspired by his journey, with many stepping forward to support other families in need. Shaq continued to work with the local art center, mentoring other kids like Tyler and showing them that their dreams were within reach. Driving home that night, Shaq couldn't help but smile. It started with a simple act of compassion, offering a boy a meal, and had grown into something extraordinary. Kindness doesn't just change lives, he thought. It creates a legacy. And for Tyler, Grace, and everyone else touched by the story, that legacy would live on. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more uplifting tales of hope and compassion. Let's spread the message that even the smallest act of kindness can create a ripple effect and change lives. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of the power of giving and the strength of human connection.